50 minutes in, before mentioning Obama, which is itself interesting. Now, he came in promising a different foreign policy to George W. Bush, and he said that the Middle East would be a priority. What's your verdict on the signs so far? He's not in that long, but
I thought you were going to bring up the Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, I was going to ask that as well.
Well, that is the Nobel Prize for public speaking.
Yeah. How inspirational.
Donald Chomsky put it very well in the RDS the other night. Donald Chomsky put it very well in the RDS the other night. He said, he's done nothing for peace, but that's better than all his predecessors. He should have turned it down. He should have said, I'm humbled to receive it, but I'm unworthy of it. I haven't yet achieved those things which I think you want. Give it to someone else. But he didn't accept it. Very Blair-like, I thought that was. I never had a lot of hope. You know, Obama knows the Middle East. He knows what's going on there. And he knows Rashid Halabi, who's a very prominent Columbia Palestinian professor, although later he denied meeting him on the subject. But even before he was inaugurated, he said nothing during the Gaza war. Nothing at all. And he was made Time Person of the Year. You can't be a woman or a man of the year, Person of the Year. And I was very struck, I don't know if I've got it here, in this interview, which went on for 5 pages, he devoted 1 sentence to the Middle East. He was talking about his priorities. And these are his words. It's obviously taken from a recording. It isn't very grammatical. And seeing if we can build on some of the progress between the Israelis and the Arabs, at least in conversation, that's been made around the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, this will be a priority. And my heart fell. No, it's not going to work. And the moment he said, I went to Cairo to watch this speech in Cairo University, and there were already hints of problems over. He reached out to the Muslims, he wanted the Iranians, he apologized for the coup by the CIA against Mossadegh in the 1950s, and he basically said, mea culpa for all the terrible things we've done. And then he referred to the relocation of the Palestinians in 1948, presumably like the relocation of Bosnian Muslims by the Serbs. And I saw there another problem. Someone wrote that in to soften the impact. And I'm afraid that governments are not about good guys and bad guys. John may agree with me. Governments are about power and the use of power. And you can have the most highest moral designs in the world, but they won't be fulfilled because governments are not nice things, are not nice institutions. And it was, palpably obvious what was going to happen when he said a freeze on all settlements. And Hillary Clinton was becoming hysterical about it. She said, we're not just talking, I don't want to hear about natural growth so they can continue. A stop to settlements. And Netanyahu was quoted, I think it was in Haaretz, as saying, they just don't get it, do they? And he carried on. And he's being allowed to carry on. And Clinton basically said, well, let's have negotiations anyway. And Mahmoud Abbas, a colourless man who wrote a 600-page book on the peace process and didn't once use the word occupation, was even prepared to go along with that at one point, and even prepared to delay discussion of the Goldstone report, which you would have thought was vitally important for Palestinian historical narrative, if nothing else. Where do you go? There's just nothing I see nothing out there in the future. It's just getting worse.
I thought that the Hezbollah forces in Lebanon might have attacked Israel at that time, and I'm wondering why Hezbollah didn't to split Israeli forces, and what is the political situation?
Look, Hezbollah did drive the Israelis out. That's why they left in 2000. They didn't leave because they were desperate to abide by a UN resolution. They left because their occupation zone was untenable and under constant attack, both by suicide bombers and by ordinary conventional guerrilla warfare. So they left for that reason. That they tried to redeem their Israeli military status in 2006, and they lost again. I'm not sure that Hezbollah won. The Hezbollah called it a divine victory. I was in Southern Lebanon, it didn't seem very divine to me, but the Israelis certainly lost. Look, I want to go back to your first point again. You want to avert your eyes. I'm sorry, I think you should see the images of the reality of the world. And I don't think you should avert your eyes.
No,
let me just finish.
Let me just finish. To see them. That's the question I'm asking.
No, but I'm afraid that if you're going to support a war, or you're going to make a vote about a war, you should see what it's about. I'm sorry. If you're going to say this is a great book, then read it. Let me just finish. Just a second. Let me just finish. But when I turn on the 6 news on RTE, the 6-1, the most boring news broadcast in Europe. Which a friend of mine calls the crime show. You're bombarded with images of bodies covered up with white sheets, and police officers, the Garda Síochána, giving statements about the most brutal, terrible crime ever. We're constantly being given the details of rape cases in which courts are saying this is the worst crime ever, it's crime I've ever, etc., etc. You're faced every night, even on RT, even in Little Ireland, by terrible, terrible acts. You better watch it, see what war's about too. As a matter of fact, what's very interesting is that the coverage of the North, when you could show it, I'm not talking about the infamous Conquerors of Brown legislation, which of course Mrs. Thatcher happily embraced as well. The coverage of the North could sometimes be very powerful in terms of images of the day. What's very interesting about it is that, for example, on Saturdays now, you know the Irish Times carried 2 pages of previous issues, whether it be World War II or whatever. I noticed the last Saturday they had coverage of the North, and Martin Cowley was on the front page. I mean, Martin's old friend of mine, I was in the North at the same time. And it was on a shooting in a Catholic pub. And the reporting was stunning. The way, the language that was used, and the passion involved in the reporting in the Irish Times was quite amazing. And it was quite a reflection on the Irish Times now, which is, I'm an Irish Times reader, I support it. It's a very worthy paper, God, it can be boring. And I know that, of course, the story was much bigger, but it showed that there was a time when you could deal with wars and deal with them in the most passionate, dramatic way. By God, you had to read every word. I reread it. I mean, the print version was reprinted was not so good as the original would be, but it was bloody good reporting. And I think you can have good reporting. And you can't show a body torn apart with taste, because it is not tasteful, I'm afraid. But if you're going to play an active part in politics and you want to involve yourself and have opinions, you've got to see them as terrible things. I'm sorry. And I have to be honest, it's a personal way. If I've got to see it, why shouldn't you? I think we should have that lady over here, John, if she's got a mic. She's got a mic, or she hasn't got a mic there? Here it comes. It's on its way, like the Olympic torch. The torch bit, by the way, was invented by the Nazis. It wasn't there before. Yes, go ahead.
I hope this isn't a stupid question.
It is not.
I'm entirely on the press, and I'm 78 years of age. And what I wouldn't do to Benjamin Netanyahu isn't repeatable. What I would like to know, 2 short questions. Who supplies Israel with their oil? And secondly, how is Mordecai Vanunu? Is he still alive?
First of all, he's alive, of course he is, yes. And he's being harassed by the Israelis as usual. He still has connections with journalists and can talk to them, but not very easily. I've never met Mordecai Vanunu. I would like to, but I haven't had the chance when I go to Israel. He was in prison for much of the time. The oil comes from the international markets through Rotterdam. You can buy oil in Rotterdam, you don't have to deal directly with the Arabs. Of course it's expensive, but the Americans are paying for it, so it doesn't matter.
Okay. Sorry, yes, somebody with the microphone, yeah. Here, yep. Number 3, yes. Have you? Yeah, I can see you as well.
Hello? Yeah, cool, thanks. Amnesty International released a report last week about the unfair distribution of water between Israel and Palestine. Have you seen the effect of your year's reporting in the Middle East of how resources are becoming more and more scarce and the effect that's having on people there?
Look, I haven't reported on the water issue in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for several years. We have a correspondent in Independent Jerusalem, he's a friend of mine, and he covers that very thoroughly and did cover the Amnesty report. When I have reported on it in the past, it hasn't got any better. It is a fact that the Israelis control most of the aquifers in the occupied territories, and that the disparity in water, fresh, clean water, between the various communities is totally in favour of Israel. That is a fact.
Is it your impression that war now is a constant, that it will be always with us?
Well, I think if we picked up an average newspaper in 1942, it would be the same answer, wouldn't it? Or 1915 for that matter. Look, I think war is an addiction. I think it's like smoking or drinking or drugs. Once people get used to it, they want to use it, they need it. It solves problems quickly. It doesn't, but they think it does. And once you're caught by an addiction, you can't break out of it. A typical example is Tony Blair, who of course has a very special relationship with God, but nonetheless, well, God never gives him any advice, and God never said, you know, Tony, the Iraq thing may not be such a good idea. But the point I'm making is that when, you remember, it was not Iraq that destroyed Blair, it was Lebanon in 2006. He refused a ceasefire because Bush didn't want a ceasefire, because the Israelis wanted more time to beat the Hezbollah, which they, of course, failed to do. But Blair went along with this. Now, a ceasefire is a humanitarian gesture to save life, and Blair used it as a policy option.
For about 10 days.
For about 10 days. And all those people who died in Lebanon after that blood was on Tony Blair's hands, and Bush, of course, he was raped, but I mean Blair. He didn't want a ceasefire. That's what destroyed him with New Labour, or Labour, if New Labour exists. And it had become a policy option. It was an addiction. You could play with war. You needed war. And we love war. Newspaper editors love war. Why are there so many war movies? Why now are we still being saturated with World War II? Inglourious Bastards, whatever that stupid movie's title was. I mean, constantly. War. We need it. We breathe it. It's exciting. It's a kind of perversion. It's psychologically deeply damaging, but it's there and we want it. And I'm still not sure why, but I think it's an addiction, and I don't think I'll ever go away.
Yesterday,